Can you road trip in an electric vehicle? Absolutely, if it's a Tesla, and the supercharger is one of the main reasons why. But there's always room for improvement, and amazingly enough, Tesla actually listens to its customers, including little old me. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. I am obviously back in my studio. I drove back home from Springfield, Virginia yesterday. Very, very sad circumstances with my father, who, by the way, was an Episcopal minister in addition to being a professor of religious studies. If you happen to be interested in donating to his memorial fund at St. Barnabas Episcopal Church in Annandale, Virginia, I'll leave a link in the description. Anyway, on to the topic of road trips and electric vehicle charging. The trip is about 585 miles from my home to their home, and I've driven it a lot in the last 6 or 8 months or so. So I know the trip very well, and I actually know quite a few of the superchargers quite well now because I go to them often, but there are also quite a few on the way up from my house in Athens, Georgia to Springfield, Virginia. So there are quite a few choices. It's not like you have to take one or another. When you go out west, sometimes there's only you kind of have to take what's available, but with this, there's multiple choices. And so making the trip multiple times has allowed me some insight into supercharging and effective road tripping with a Tesla. So of course, the first question, and what probably most of you are here for, is can you do a road trip in an electric vehicle? The answer is yes. If it's a Tesla, you can do it very, very easily. Not only are the superchargers always available, like they're never broken, like I've never, knock on wood, but I've never had a supercharger station be down. At the most, there would be like one stall that's out of order or something like that. And then the app will actually tell you, it'll be like stall 3B is out of order. So don't, use that one or something. And beyond being simply available, they always operate at their maximum capacity. The 150 kilowatt chargers operate at 150. The 250s operate at 250 kilowatts. So what you see is what you get when it comes to charging. And that's really fantastic. It's something that you can trust. Obviously, at this point, there are not as many charging stations as there are gas stations. So the reliability and efficacy of the stations that you charge at is critically important. And of course, that's not the case with other fast charging networks in America. At least I haven't tried it in other countries, but it's really hit or miss with other charging networks. So, Tesla's supercharger network is what I depend on road trips, and it doesn't fail me, and I've never had any problems. Additionally, of course, Tesla's navigation software will guide you there. If you use full self-driving, it will actually drive you there, which is really, really nice. That's what I use. And believe me, at a 10.5-hour drive, it's like, I really do appreciate full self-driving. It is utterly fantastic to have something like that on board. Worth every single penny, whether you subscribe to it or buy it or whatever. I would absolutely recommend it if you're doing a lot of road trips. It's nice around town and it's nice for shorter trips, and I do use it pretty much every day. But for those longer road trips, it's actually a safety critical thing. And by the way, in honor of full self-driving, I've got my I'm on an Ego Trip t-shirt on today. You can find a link to this and many more t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, etc. in the description. And I was thinking about this yesterday when I was driving home. I was like, I would much rather have every car on the road be a Tesla with full self-driving than to have any human beings driving, because most of the problems that occur are because humans are crazy. You do these 10.5-hour drives and you see a lot of nutty behavior from other human beings, aggressive behavior, stupid behavior, people just crossing lines without paying attention. And when I thought about it, I was like, I would way rather have every single car on the road be using Tesla's full self-driving on the highway. I don't know about on the city streets, but definitely on the highway, it would be a way safer place if they were all using full self-driving instead of depending on human beings to drive. But anyway, whether you have full self-driving or not, the car will guide you to the next supercharger that is available. It will tell you how long you need to stop. You just show up, you plug it in. There's no payment or anything like that because the app has your credit card information. It just takes care of all of that stuff. You don't have to stand next to the car like you do with gas when you're filling that up, because of course it's dangerous if you leave the thing alone and walk away. With an EV, you just plug in the vehicle and then you can go to the bathroom, you can go to the grocery store, you can go to the restaurant, wherever you want to go. You can just do that and not worry about it. And the app will even alert you when there's about 5 minutes left to go before you need to get back to the car and unplug the vehicle and continue your trip. So the long and short of it is, if you buy a Tesla, doing electric vehicle road trips is actually easier than doing it with a gas car, because it just tells you where to go. You put in your destination and it just tells you where you need to stop, how long, all of that kind of stuff is taken care of for you. You don't even have to think about it. Of course, the second question that people always bring up is how much extra time is it going to take? So yesterday, I actually made note of this. I had to do 3 stops. I started off with 95% charge on my car when I left my parents' house. I had to do 3 stops. Generally speaking, when I used to drive a gas car there, I would do 2 stops. If you really, really wanted to, you could do one, but that was terrible on my bladder. I couldn't do that anymore. But anyway, so let's just say 2 stops with a gas car. At a minimum, it was 10 minutes per stop, but more realistically, it was 15 minutes per stop. So the stops in the gas car generally took me about a half an hour to do, right? So it was about 5 minutes to fill up the tank, another 5 minutes to go to the bathroom, another 5 minutes to get some food, and then I would eat on the road, which was very annoying, but I could do that. So it was about a half an hour, and not the greatest thing in the world, because it would be much nicer to sit down and actually eat in a restaurant or something instead of having to like shove the thing in your mouth while you're actually driving and wiggling the steering wheel and all that kind of stuff. So how bad is it comparatively with an electric vehicle? Well, it took me 55 minutes. I did 3 stops. One was 20 minutes, one was 25, and one was 10. So yes, that was an extra 25 minutes, or, close to 50% extra in terms of the amount of time I had to spend stopping versus a gas car. But of course, the benefit of that is that I was able to be more restful about the whole thing, right? So it was okay. I would go and I would actually eat in the restaurant. I would actually stop and I would, eat a sandwich or whatever that was, get some fries, something along those lines. So obviously it's much more chill to be able to do that. And I could walk around a little bit and stretch my legs. So while it was an extra 25 minutes, it's only an extra 25 minutes on a 10.5-hour road trip. So it generally took me about 10 hours to do in a gas car, and it takes about 10.5 to do with the Tesla. So it does add a little bit of time, but it doesn't add that much extra time. I think a lot of people think it's going to be hours and hours, and maybe with another fast charging company where you might only get 20 kilowatts out of something that said it was going to be 150, then yeah, it could take hours for it to charge. But with a Tesla, if it says 20 minutes is enough, and it'll get you to the next destination, no problem at all. It figures it all out for you. You don't have to worry about it. When it says go, you go, and you just keep on driving. But here's the interesting thing. The more you as a user experience something, the more you have an insight into little tweaks that could be done to make the experience better. So I took the time yesterday while I was at one of the supercharging stops to write a post on X and explain a couple of the things that I thought could be done better. So what I said was a little bit of feedback for the Tesla supercharging team. First of all, I would really like to be able to specify how much tolerance I have for how low the battery will get before my next supercharger stop. It seems to default to 10%. I'm pretty sure that's about right, but I'm comfortable going down to 5%. So just to explain that, that's how low the battery gets before it's trying to get to a supercharger, right? So generally speaking, let's say you start with 90%. When you set the navigation, the car looks around and it sees what superchargers are available when you're at about 10% left, or a little bit more. So it won't go below 10% generally speaking. It usually looks between 10 and 20% depending on, the distances you're going and everything. And with my car, 10% is about 33 miles left approximately. I, however, am comfortable going down below that to like 5 to 10%. So down to maybe 15 miles left on the car as opposed to 33. But of course, the issue here is that Tesla's navigation system will not allow you to have a higher risk tolerance. I also, after posting this, saw some people say that they have a lower risk tolerance and they would prefer 15 or 20% as opposed to 10%. So it would be nice if there was just sort of a slider and you just, you put down your risk tolerance. You're like, sure, I'll go to 5%. I don't think below 5% is a good idea, but somewhere between 5 and 20% that you can set as your default, like this is what I would desire to arrive at the next stop with this amount left in the battery. And I'll touch on why more in just a second, but first I'll read the next part because these two things connect to each other. I would also like to be able to always prefer 250 kilowatt chargers rather than 150 kilowatt chargers. So if you don't know, the more kilowatts you can pump into a vehicle, the faster it can charge. That's the basic TLDR about this. A 150 kilowatt charger can max out at somewhere around 500 miles per hour. Now it can't maintain that. There's a curve to it. It goes up to that point and then it decreases. Whereas a 250 kilowatt charger can max out at about 1,000 miles per hour. But this is where it comes back to how much charge you have in your battery at the time you start charging. So the lower the battery percentage, I think if it's below 5%, it actually can't max it out, but somewhere around between 5 and 10%, you get your maximum charging rate out of your supercharger. So if you're charging at 1,000 miles an hour, it'll go up to that. And then as the battery gets to 20, 25%, it starts to slowly tail off. And when it gets to like 70 or 80%, it gets very, very slow, which is the reason why people generally say if you're doing a road trip, you generally want to try to charge to 80% and then continue on to the next stop, because that last 20% takes forever to do because the battery can only charge so quickly. It's not like a gas tank where you just fill up at the same amount of speed for the whole time and then the thing stops, right? The gas tank, it just fills up the amount of gasoline in the tank and then it stops at that point. With a battery charging system, the lower the battery percentage when you arrive, the faster you can charge. And this is why I would prefer 250 kilowatt chargers as opposed to 150s, because I would prefer to arrive with a very low state of charge and then get that maximum amount of charge and, sustain that for the most most amount of time in order to cut down on the amount of time I have to sit at the charger. So those are a couple of tweaks to the usability. I also suggested something for the UI or user interface. And finally, on the UI front, I would love to have a clock time in addition to the amount of minutes left. So instead of just saying 25 minutes, for example, if that's how much time you have left to charge to continue on your road trip, it would say something like 25 minutes and 1:13 p.m. I would remember the clock time much better than the timer in terms of when I need to be back to the car to continue my trip. Thanks so much for considering this. So first of all, a note to everyone, always be constructive and pleasant when you're doing critiques of things and feedback. Notice I said thank you. I said it's just a couple of suggestions. I wasn't like you guys are terrible people or something like that, right? There's just a general point for being a good human being is to always try to be constructive with your feedback and positive about it. So why is a clock time useful? It seems kind of dumb. It's like, why not just use the timer on there? It says 25 minutes. That's great. It's 25 minutes. What I mean by that is when I plug in the vehicle, I look on the screen and it says you have 25 minutes. And then I go about my business. I go to the bathroom, I go get some food or something. And then I'm like, well, I remember it said 25 minutes, but I don't remember the minute that I looked at it, right? What time of day was it when I actually looked at that timer? And then I have to kind of go like, oh, geez, was it 10 minutes ago or something? And of course I can look at the app and it will tell me how much time is left and all of that is fine, but it does require me to then take extra steps. So no big deal, but it is just a small annoyance. It would simply be better if it said, hey, be back at your car at 1:13 p.m. And then I would look at my watch and I would say, oh, it's 1:05. So I still have 8 minutes left. No big deal. I don't have to worry about it yet. So as I said in this, it's a small suggestion. It's a UI suggestion. It's an enhancement. It's not something that's super critical, but it was just something that I've noticed from doing a lot of road trips and doing a lot of stopping at superchargers is that I tend to forget what time it was that I looked at the timer when I go in. And it would just be much easier if there was just a thing that told me to be back at this minute because I'm carrying around a watch. So I don't have to worry about that. I can just look at my watch and know how much time I have left simply by looking at it. And here's the really interesting thing about Tesla. They're a huge company, but they're still amazingly responsive to us, normal humans. In response to this post, Martin Vieja, who is head of investor relations, wrote back, I especially like the departure time suggestion. Great idea, which is nice. So it'd be really cool someday if there's a little clock time on the dashboard when I plug into the supercharger, I'll be like, wow, I had a part to do with that. So that's kind of cool. And then he continued, the team has your list, which is just amazing stuff. This is a big company with a lot of very important people, and to take the time to actually look at a silly post from a user like me and then to respond to it and in a very pleasant way too. So I really appreciate that. But that is really amazing for Tesla. It feels much more like a startup still. It feels like a small team that is very excited about the user base that they have, and they want to communicate with that user base, not a behemoth of a company with millions of cars being sold. So I really do appreciate that. So in conclusion, I've done many road trips, some of them multiple day road trips. I've stopped at a ton of superchargers. I have basically never had a problem except way back in 2021 where there was a supercharger station that was just completely full and there was a line. That was literally the only time. And by the way, for anybody who's concerned, nowadays the Tesla navigation software will actually reroute you to another available supercharger if the one you're targeting is getting full. So it even takes care of that problem that I had one time. But in all of the supercharging I've done, and I believe the number is somewhere around 25,000 miles of supercharging that I've done. I think I have that number correct in my head. So anyway, I've done a lot of road trips and a lot of supercharging over the last 3 years, and I can safely tell you it is not only as good as driving a gas car on road trips, it's actually far better. I would not want to do a road trip in a gas car anymore. It would be very uncomfortable. Having to drive the car would be super annoying. Having to stop at gas stations and fill up with the fumes and the blah, 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 and having to do the credit cards and all that stuff. Yeah, it would be a little bit faster, but it's really not worth it. I have actually gotten to the point where I prefer to have these stops. I look forward to it. And yeah, I'm in my late 50s. So maybe when I was 20 and I had super bladder and I could just go forever and I really wanted to get there fast or something like that, maybe that was important. But an extra half hour in a 10+ hour road trip just doesn't feel like that much extra time. And the benefits of having an electric vehicle and driving an electric vehicle are massive. So first of all, if you own a Tesla and you've been afraid to take a road trip, don't be afraid. It's going to be a really good and pleasant experience. And second of all, if you've been considering considering buying an EV, please, please, please consider buying a Tesla, because you get the supercharger network in addition to just the car. And the navigation, the supercharger network, and all of that make the entire road trip experience incredibly pleasant with a Tesla. All right, so that's my experience. Let me know in the comments what your experience with road trips in an EV and a Tesla specifically have been. And in the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.